There's definitely some other stuff worth making fun of, and other stuff just worth talking about in general. So, one of those things that is a topic that just makes me like and face palm. I hope that it's just trolling. Uh, but we recently had Yoshi P, who is um, one of the Final Fantasy 14 director, and he was asked about the possibility of remakes of Final Fantasy games, and he knows that there are requests for Final Fantasy IX remake, which was in the Nvidia leak, has been something that supposedly is happening for a while now. But here's what he had to say about the Final Fantasy IX remake. I do know there are requests for Final Fantasy IX to be made, but when you think about Final Fantasy IX, it's a game with huge volume. When you think about all that volume, I wonder if it's possible to remake that as a single title. It's a difficult one. It is a tough question. Now, to be clear, Final Fantasy IX originally released in 2000 on the PlayStation 1. I can actually grab my PS1 copy. Somewhere. My original black border Final Fantasy IX, and then it came out later as a PS1 classic for PS3 and PSP, where I have it, and then got support for Vita in 2012. Then it was released for mobile and PC in 2016, and then came to PS4 in 2017 and Xbox One and Switch in 2019. And I'll grab my my physical of Switch version, but you can go ahead and take it away on your thoughts.
Oh boy. Okay, yeah. So I really hope that he's not being serious. Good, very good style there. But I really hope he's not being serious. I really hope that this isn't a thing, because there's no reason why this game should take multiple parts to tell the story. I feel like they could possibly do that considering the fact that Final Fantasy VII was successful with it. So they might say that's justification enough for us to do it. But I really don't think so. I mean, the game was on the PS1. How are we going to stretch it out so that multiple parts? I mean, it's really ridiculous, and I feel like the only way you could actually do that is if you just really stretch out every detail and fill the game out with so much padding that you say it's worth doing it. And I mean, something like that is how we got the Hobbit trilogy. I mean, taking something that was a single work and then stretching out so much and padding it with so much extra detail that didn't necessarily need to be there. I mean, granted, Hobbit had a lot of extra details that shouldn't have been there, but doing something like that makes it completely pointless, and it's really not worth it. At most, and this is a very big at most, if you made it 2 games, I still wouldn't like that. But if you're going to say multi-volume, that sounds as if though you want to make the game at least 3 titles. Maybe see if we can do 4, but I definitely would see it as being 3 titles. 3 different games. It's really not necessary to do that, and I'm really, really hoping that that's not true. But as a side note, just I thought it was very interesting was he was also asked about which game he would like to remake given the chance, and he said he wanted to do Final Fantasy III. I just thought that was interesting because not too many people talk about Final Fantasy III. I mean, granted, people probably talk about that more than 2, which was considered to be one of the worst of the original sort of Final Fantasy games. But I thought that was interesting. 3's not a bad game. It just does not hold a candle to anything that came after it.
Right.
But overall, though, for the main part of this discussion, I just hope it's not true, because I do not like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if either he is completely trolling or if he just doesn't know about this remake that's supposedly already that's already being done. I don't know. I really do not like the idea of doing this. Now, to be fair, I wasn't really a fan of the idea of them doing it with Final Fantasy VII, but I ended up really liking Remake, and I've heard Rebirth is even better from what everyone's been saying, and Rebirth has, does a lot more of the story, basically, as far as I know, where, Remake was just until you left Midgar, basically. They really stretched that out, but not in a way that I thought was bad. I actually thought it worked just fine. Rebirth basically takes you to the end of Disc 1. So, when you consider Disc 2 is not technically as long as Disc 1, I know that the third game is supposed to just be the rest of the story. So, at least we know that, the third game will cover, what's left of the Final Fantasy VII story with whatever alternate stuff they do with it. And I have no idea what that's going to be, but doing that with Final Fantasy IX, while I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to the idea of a Final Fantasy IX remake being different in some ways, I don't want them to Nomura it like they did with Final Fantasy VII. Because, I think Remake has incredible gameplay, despite being obviously a very padded version of that early story from Final Fantasy VII. But I thought it also, it did a good job with developing some of the characters more, like characters like Jessie, for example, and Biggs and Wedge, because Biggs and Wedge and Jessie, they were all very short-lived, literally and figuratively, in the original game, and in Remake and Rebirth. I don't know what, if any, part any of them have in Rebirth, but in Remake, it seems like at least one of them may have survived. It's hinted at the end. A bit of a spoiler, but whatever. I don't even know if you'll ever even play these games, but I don't know what even happens in Rebirth yet exactly, other than the major event that happens at the end of Disc 1 still happens in Rebirth. That's the only thing I know. But beyond that, I don't really know anything about the rest of it. So I don't like the idea of Final Fantasy IX remake being split up like that. I just don't want Square Enix to milk it out. And my hope is that because of the fact that Final Fantasy IX remake was in the NVIDIA leak, that it's something that's already being worked on, and that it is just going to be a true to the original remake. Don't mess with the formula, just very simply update the visuals and all of that, and that's all you need to do. Just update the visuals. You can re-record the soundtrack, of course, that'd be great. Obviously redo all the cutscenes and all that. It's yes, remake, it doesn't have to be a full-blown, turn it into an action game. I just don't think that's necessary. Even though I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, I also want, for fans who are, really big on the original game, to not have it changed like that. It's just not necessary. 7, I felt like, was much, much less of an issue, mostly because of the fact that with the way that Advent Children and everything took the direction that took the Final Fantasy VII story, it felt like it fit a little bit better, but I don't know. And also just the idea that remake and that the new trilogy is essentially taking place after Advent Children, after the events of Advent Children, potentially. Not that I know whether or not they've said anything like that in the story. It was just a theory that was presented after Remake came out that actually made me go from hating what they did with the story to be like, oh, okay, I'm cool with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. You're not erasing the original story. You're just taking what Sephiroth said at the end of Advent Children and using it to do your crazy Nomura crap with. And it's like, okay, fine. You're not erasing the original story. You're just adding on to it. It's like, I'm fine with that. I can live with that. Anyway. Yeah. I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen with this. I hope that this idea of it being multiple games is either trolling or that he just has no idea what he's talking about. But that's all I got. Alright, you have anything else?
No, sir.
Alrighty. Well, you want to talk about this new California law? Or potential law?
Yeah. So recently, and I think this happened last week sometime, California Governor Gavin Newsom, he signed a bill into law over there that prevents companies from they have to be upfront and disclose if the products they provide, whether this is for video games, movies, shows, etc., they have to be transparent if these things are actually able to be owned by the people that buy them. So, as it says in this article from IGN, as by The Verge, the law, AB 2426, will prohibit storefronts from using the words buy, purchase, or any other term which a reasonable person would understand to confer an unrestricted ownership interest in the digital good or alongside an option for a time-limited rental. And so, essentially, they have to make sure everything is in plain English and that no one could be confused about such things being purchased. Oh, and also it applies to ebooks, music, and any other sort of digital media as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. It doesn't go into effect until next year. I don't think there's an actual date that I recall seeing as far as like it goes live this day, but definitely just goes out into effect next year. So this is already done. It's already going to happen, but just hasn't kicked in yet. So I've got a couple things that I'll say, but do you want to start off though?
Yeah, so I like the idea of this, theoretically. It's good to start forcing vendors to do this. I'm just wondering how much they're actually going to enforce it. And furthermore, I'm wondering what that's going to mean for all of the previous purchases that people have done through digital storefronts. I mean, are these storefronts suddenly going to start saying, hey, just so you know, just FYI, all these things that you quote-unquote purchased previously are just licensed out to you, and we can take away the license at any time? I mean, is that what they're going to do? Are they just not going to say anything and just let people figure it out themselves when they eventually get their stuff taken away? You know, how's this going to work? And is it going to expand beyond California? I'm no fan of Gavin Newsom. I'm no fan of just the hellhole that California has become. And this is as someone who was born in California, lived there for 16 years before I moved to Alaska. And, like, California is not a place that I would ever think of as home despite being born there. Because it's so far from being aligned with anything I believe or value or anything else. Basically, the only thing good about California is that it's a pretty place in general. But it is absolutely awful. And I think that the song from Spinal Tap is a good descriptor for California. And I'm not gonna, of course, include that song in the podcast, but I may link to it in the description just for the sake of people being able to hear that. Spinal Tap is hilarious, by the way. a hilarious mockumentary from the early 80s, and it's, oh man, it is. I mean, you have to recognize it's satire. Don't take it seriously, because otherwise you may be very offended by some of the stuff in there. But, oh man, it's so funny. Anyway, yeah, that's everything I have on that front.
Yeah, I initially, I definitely agree. I was in the mindset of, a good idea from a politician and from California of all places. That I'm like, is there an odd change in the weather right now? Are very hot places freezing over? But then I thought about it, and I wonder what's to prevent, say, these companies from saying, okay, we have to disclose if these games are, or any sort of media is being licensed or not. So we just won't sell you anything that that you'll get to keep. So I wonder if these types of storefronts will decide, okay, we have to disclose if we're going to offer that to you, but we just won't do it anymore. And so you still will have to buy this from us, whether you like the fact that it's a license or not. And I mean, could this even potentially sometime down the road get them to say, okay, instead of just doing this type of thing where we sell licenses, we're just gonna make more subscription things where, we'll have to worry about having any type of disclaimer, whether it's like, oh, this is a license, you have it temporarily, we don't have to worry about doing all that legal jargon or anything like that. Let's just go ahead and make more subscriptions, that way people just go and pay us more money, have that reoccurring revenue, don't have to worry about any type of disclaimer. People can get what they want. We can still pull it out because legally it's a subscription service. They know they're not going to be able to keep it, so we can just keep doing what we're doing here. That's the type of thing that I am concerned about. And again, it's not that it will happen, but I'm just looking at the worst case scenario, which is something similar to something that happened several years ago with how there was a proposal for like trying to stop scalpers online and stuff from buying stuff like that. So I'm partially concerned if this is just a case of government doing something in a misguided attempt to do something good, but somehow it might end up it might turning on the consumers in the long run. So I'm not opposed to this in theory, just I'm hoping the execution doesn't ruin things down the road. But we'll definitely see when that time comes. But it definitely is good to know if you're buying something, if you're actually going to keep it. I know certain things I definitely do not have any type of assumption that I actually own unless there is some type of offline file I can use, and that's something I can easily just transfer. Like if I'm like, I don't buy anything type of ebooks off of Amazon because I know that those things are completely licensed to Amazon. You need to have like a Kindle or something like that in order to even just use those ebooks. Some stuff like music, I've gotten back to buying CDs now or something like that, just because digital stuff, I definitely avoid Spotify, I like to play, because it's streaming. You're not actually getting to put the music on your phone or anything like that, or if you have it on your computer and listen to it there, or like go travel and take it with you. You always need to have a constant access unless you pay for premium and you can do stuff like that. But again, you're paying for something that you aren't actually keeping. So I do feel like to a degree some people should know if what they're buying actually is something they own or not. I feel like that's something that is a bit of a problem, that some people just aren't thinking about it. And I don't think it's something that you necessarily have to be good with technology to know, but it's just something that I feel like to a degree, if you've been using technology on a pretty regular basis, it should be something that's kind of common sense to know whether something you're purchasing is buying or just renting. But still, having that clarity is a good thing, though.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just have to see what happens with it, but I don't know. I'm pessimistic about whether or not companies will be really honest about it. And of course, your idea of potentially they're just going to use this as a reason to do more subscription services, well, that seems pretty likely. So I guess we'll just watch and wait and see what happens.